everyone. I'm going to have a special guest on in about 5 seconds. If you want to follow him right now, it's Personal Finance Club. His name is Jeremy Schneider. I think I got that right. And super successful guy. He put up a post recently titled, "Last year I paid over $152K in federal tax, and that wasn't enough." And his commentary was super interesting to me. Please, everyone joining, as always, say where in the world you are from. Ankit from India nailed it. And here he is. Here's Jeremy. Should just be 1 sec. How you doing, sir?
Hey.
Nice. Can you
hear me?
Yeah. I can hear you perfectly.
Great. We're doing it.
We're doing it. Yeah. Thank you for your pinging me. I live in Boulder, Colorado. There's huge mountains. You might have been here.
Yeah.
And
I have. It's beautiful.
The mountains just entirely disappeared because of smoke
Really?
From wildfires. And it's toxic to be outside. So I was a little bit excited and taking photos of the, right now we have a fuchsia sun, like a bright purple sun.
That's crazy. Yeah, I'm in California, and we had a couple of weeks where it's like, as if 2020 wasn't weird enough, you like look out your window and there's like orange skies. You're like, oh my God, it's like the actual apocalypse.
Exactly. That's exactly what's happening. And yeah, we all say apocalypse or Walking Dead or whatever, but and this kind of connects with what we're talking about, trying to encourage everyone who might be on the fence or not a voter generally to vote and to be active. So recently I read your post. A friend actually shared it to her account, and she's actually a firefighter here in Colorado. And I really appreciated your post. It wasn't this sort of bleeding heart liberal kind of thing, but it was just pointing out some basic facts. Can you maybe sum up, I could read your post to everybody, but if you could sum up kind of what you were talking about.
Sure. So I'm not super like extraordinarily political on my page. And that's partially because we're such this like divisive place now where it's just like, we're living in two different worlds and we can't even see each other's perspective. And so I try to share like very fact-based informational things. This one was one of those, and I hope people can like learn from it. So basically I'm rich.
So exactly. So just to interject, people follow you probably for great financial advice. You're super successful. You say in your post, you're making $759,000 approximately in 2019.
Yeah. So my net worth right now is about 3.5 million. I sold an internet company when I was 34 for 5 million. After tax and sharing, I had about 2 million out from that windfall, and my wealth has continued to grow. And so I've been, it depends. It's a matter of perspective. I'm not even in the 1%, strangely enough. Like the 1%, I think you need about $10 million. I know it's crazy. Like I feel extremely wealthy, but like.
So when Bernie Sanders is like the 1%, he's not even talking about you.
I know. It's not even me. Yet still I have this like massive amount of money, and the number, people have a hard time even, you can't even wrap your head around the numbers, right? Like, they say like, if you want to know the difference between a billion and a million, it's about a billion. Like a million is 1/1000th of a billion. And so the difference is like a billion. Anyway, but so, and I don't claim to be, everyone only has the view that they have out of their own eyes into this world, right? So I don't claim to know the struggle of everyone. Like I grew up in Michigan. I was like a middle-class kid. And so I didn't like, I can't say I'm really rags to riches, but I was middle class and I didn't inherit a bunch of money or anything like that. But it's started a company. I sold it for a bunch of money.
Are you saying that your father didn't give you a small loan of
small form? No, I didn't. I think my mom sold me her 94 Jeep Cherokee at one point, and I paid her back over the course of 5 years or something, which was very helpful. And I was thankful. And so, yeah. But there's no $1 million loans for it. In fact, I hired my mom and she made $1 million from the sale of my company.
Yeah. For moms. I love that.
Yeah, I know. She's awesome. She's awesome. Yeah. So basically, to get to the point, the post. So like last year, my taxable income was $750 some thousand, and I did not have a job last year. For some context, the reason my income was so high is basically because I have a bunch of money in the stock market, and I sold a bunch of stock, which was like a taxable gain. It had gone up a lot of money, and then my tax on that 759,000 was about 150,000, which is a lot of money. Don't get me wrong, like I don't wish for higher taxes for myself. There it is. There's the numbers. Yeah, 152,000. What is that? Is that your phone or an iPad or something?
That's just my laptop. Yeah.
Oh, your laptop. Okay. I was like, oh, you had that printed out thing. Yeah. So it sounds like a lot of money, but when you compare it to what other people are paying in taxes, I think there's some pretty gross like unfairnesses. So, for example, I paid slightly less in federal tax as a percentage of my income compared to someone who made $72,000 per year. And the reason,
I'm glad you said that. That was the line that really stuck in my craw. And that was the line that made me feel like you weren't making some, I love Bernie, but you weren't making some big Bernie Sanders point. You were just pointing out something super straightforward. I paid slightly less in tax than someone who made $72,000 last year. And you made 759,000 as a percentage. I assume you're saying. Yeah,
as a percentage for sure.
Right.
And I think at a minimum, I hope most people can agree that the percentage should at least be equal. If not, I personally think it should be progressive, meaning the more money you make, the higher the percent. Because like when you take away tax, that 72,000 tax earner had about 50,000 left to live on. I had about 500 and something thousand less to, like, I had $500,000 to live on. So even if I paid $100,000 more in tax, for example, I would still have 400,000 to live on, and the 72,000 would have 50,000. I would still have 8 times more money, even if it was like a double taxation rate, right? And so, like,
and even if you're relatively conservative and you just say, I want the max amount of money to go into the economy. The people who are making $72,000 a year, I grew up with a mom who made a lot less than that. She was a teacher. She spent, I would say, probably 99% of her income on life, on mortgage, on food, on getting some clothes from Salvation Army or whatever on my back. We spent everything we made. And so the money's going straight back into the economy.
I fully agree. I think there's like this talking point that's like, oh, it's a job creation thing, or it's like it encourages investment. But I was like, like that money is sitting in bank accounts in my name doing nothing. And like I like it. Like I said, I still am looking after my interests and want to take care of my future family and do the best for the world and all that stuff. So but for sure, like if more of the tax burden were pushed to me and people that had my kind of wealth and above, and it was taken off the like normal average earners, just that, like you said, that money all gets spent. That money goes directly back into the economy, frankly benefiting business, frankly benefiting people like me, because like I want a healthy. I've started 4 businesses in my life, and I want those businesses to do well because consumers have money, and I'm not. I feel like eventually, if this thing gets too top heavy, which it seems like we're on our way there, then there's just not a working like middle class to like be consumers anymore.
And that really was the American dream, and I think is the American dream, is kind of what you did, going from the middle class or maybe the lower class into the middle class, mobility, opportunity, that based on merit and hard work, anyone could have a chance. But we see that's not really happening if, as you said, it's so top heavy. And they call that the number one predictor of an unstable society, right? To put it lightly. You want opportunity, you want a huge middle class, and you want the extremes to be smaller. You want people to be able to get into the middle class. And right now,
I agree.
None of this is radical politics here. It's just like,
well, that's the thing, is I feel like the reality based, there's this great like video that came out a few years ago, which is like, it made people like draw what they thought the ideal wealth curve would be, like the top 20%, bottom 20%. And it was like this. So like the people who work the hardest should have more. And like, okay, that's fair. Then they made them draw what they think the reality was, which was like, oh, it's actually like this. And then they drew, okay, but here's what the reality actually is. And it was just like, it was so out of whack. It's just so crazy, right? And most of, like, I was 34 when I sold my company, but for the 12 years before that, from like college through the day that I sold the company, my max take home salary was $36,000 a year. I never took more than that much out of my company. I was like driving a 99 Ford Explorer, had roommates, most of the years in my 20s were like very lean years. Like, I was living on credit cards for a long time. Like and I was paying tax bills, right? And in the year I sold my company, I wrote $1 million check to the U.S. government. That was about 30%, and actually not the U.S. A lot of it was California because I'm in the high state tax of California. But federal tax is like $600,000. But I had $2 million left over after that. Like that $1 million I paid taxes, which was like a much easier burden for me to bear than like the $10,000 I'd had to pay in taxes when I only had $30,000 left or whatever, And so it's like there's like the talking point that it's like, oh, it's not fair to people who have worked hard. I was like, yeah, but like the moral argument, which is like, how are you going to burden people who like need the money to eat? Like I literally was like, walking down the aisles of like discount grocery stores, like, comparing prices, trying to save a few cents. And like now it's like, it doesn't even matter. Like, and I'm not still on the 1%, I'm like in the 3% or something. So.
Yeah, it's nuts. I live in Boulder, Colorado, as I mentioned, and it's in the U.S. News and USA Today, blah, blah, blah. We just got named #1 city in the U.S.
Oh, nice. I love Boulder. I've been there a few times.
Yeah, it's wonderful. And, I just filled out my ballot and voted on a bunch of local issues. And in Boulder, it's kind of a joke. There's all these questions every year on the ballot. You want to pay ice?
That's my ballot. I've been working on it for 2 days. Like, the big ones we all know. I was like, it's like the school district ones. I'm like, those are tough.
Yeah, the judges is kind of what got me this year. Luckily,
judges.
I could ask people. But so there's all these ballot questions saying, would you like to pay more taxes for open space? Would you like to pay more taxes for education? And the joke in Boulder is that, because everyone's like a bleeding heart liberal in Boulder and environmentalist, is everyone's like, yes, we love paying taxes. And I want to broaden that kind of spirit. And I feel like your blog had that spirit without being kind of dumb about it. You don't want to pay more taxes, but
right.
You want to live in a healthy society. And that's why I mentioned that we were named #1. We do pay some taxes here, and we're supportive of that, but they're going to good things that enrich literally everyone's life. And then if you're rich like yourself, you can go bike out on the nice bike path and enjoy your day with your family or your friends in a way that you can't if you're living in a place that won't provide for basic functioning society.
Yeah.
So taxes aren't, obviously we all think taxes should be used more judiciously or more how we wish they were used. Everyone has different opinions on that. But taxes, like Elizabeth Warren had that kind of viral speech years ago. And again, she's political, but I love her. But she said, look, if you're successful like you, or perhaps me, I have a company with 35 or 30 employees, good for you. But you also use the public roads, use the USPS, hopefully. There's a lot of greater good that goes into our success. I was lifted up in my community here.
Definitely. Yeah, I definitely benefit from like living in a very secure country and with good infrastructure and banking that like works. And like, frankly, I think like, another one is like this free market. They're like, oh, free market's always better. It's like, well, a regulated free market is what's better. And I think the fact that, a totally free market is like Game of Thrones, where it's like whoever's got the biggest guns just steal, but we want like a fairly regulated free market. And I think, Elizabeth Warren, or I forget who, but pointed out like the cost of, what's the drug if you have like diabetes? Insulin. So like the cost of insulin is like offensively expensive. Like it's like bankrupting people. And the free market should suggest if it's such a profitable thing, then there should be competition. But like those insulin companies have like basically bought and sold all the legislation around this and basically prevented new entrants into the market. And so it's not a free market. And so like, I think that, so when you're looking at governing, I feel like, yeah, we want free markets, but we don't want like bought and sold markets that make it unfair, right? And so I feel like, yeah, like the thing where it's like, oh, older just want high tax everything. It's like, no, that's painting with too broad of a brush. It's like, we want fairness, which like is better for everyone, you know?
Yeah, I just watched some Western cowboy movie last night. I mean, that was truly a free market, right?
Right.
It was really just,
that's a free market.
Survival of the guy with the biggest guns and the most guns and the most, it was cruel. And the first thing people do in that free market situation is, ironically, is band together. All the decent folk, they band together and they try to, kind of create some sense of regulation. Is why we have clean air. Some sense of regulation is why we have, hopefully, clean water to drink. And if we don't, it's because of a lack of kind of, you can call it government or just self.
Yeah. So this like free market at all cost thing, I think is the wrong mentality. It's like we all should have won. Like I think we like competition, we like capitalism and a well-regulated market. So yeah, I don't want the company that's willing to shit on the environment the most to win. Because then, like the environment's like, why is that a partisan issue? Like, don't we all live on, we all breathe air? That one always makes me laugh. But
So I guess my final question would be, because I think we kind of nailed the point, and I encourage everyone to follow you, Personal Finance Club, and read that post. I really loved it. Yeah. I wish that were written on Elephant. We have millions of readers a month. Please, anytime, write on Elephant. That was so good, and it was.
It's only been on my Instagram. I should write it for your journal if you don't mind.
Well, that post we would. I mean, you did it without being kind of knee-jerk partisan. And I guess my question is, I grew up poor and have been relatively successful. Certainly not on your level, but my grandpa was successful and he did well, and he became kind of Scroogey. To be honest, he was a wonderful guy. But as he made more money, he became more and more uptight and more kind of conservative. Not, and I have respect for conservatives. I have good friends are conservatives, but he hated taxes, all that. So as you've made money, how have you felt that kind of pressure on your psyche to change? The people you're hearing from are different. How have you somehow remained, like your post was incredibly clear and kind of, it was like a breath of fresh air on it. How have you not got sucked into that kind of rich get richer mentality?
I don't know. I find questions like that hard to answer because it's like probably like my upbringing and when the people I know from college and like, I like live in a city and I like to expose myself to lots of diverse views and I do think when people age, they often, and especially these days, find themselves in these smaller and smaller echo chambers. And I try to be conscious of that, and frankly, I think you could probably tell by this conversation, the way I lean, especially in today's election or whatever. But I try really hard to see it from the other perspective. And I feel like, we're living in this very weird world where it's like, did you remember that viral post a few years ago that was like the blue-white dress or the blue-white or black and gold or whatever? Yeah. And like, it was so divisive because like people could only see it one way. And that's like a very simple, and when someone else is saying right next to you, calling you an idiot, saying, no, it's black and gold. And you're like, no, I can see it's blue and white. It's very, very hard to connect those things. And what we're dealing with right now is like this massively more complex version of the same thing where people are looking at from two different angles and they can't see the other person's perspective. And so I try to always, I go to like, Fox News, I go to whatever news sources, I click on the crazy links and, but and there's that new documentary, The Social, what's it called? The Social, what I'm talking about, Netflix, that says like the echo chambers that are being created.
Yeah, Social Dilemma, and it's actually produced, directed by Jeff Orlowski, who's here in Boulder. He did Chasing Coral and Chasing Ice as well, which are also great and worth watching. Yeah.
And they basically say the whole playing field is tilted such that people are falling into this like trap of like, and it's possible to like walk uphill and like really critically think like, am I in the wrong? Like what's the source of this article? Like why do I believe this? And so I try to be one of those ones walking uphill, and I try to be like, when you see these like crazy Facebook fights, I don't try to be like critical of the other side, but I try to like ask questions. I try to find common ground and say like, why do you think that? And like, but I don't, if I had the answer, man, I'd probably be a much richer man than I am.
Yeah, I mean, that's what we try to do on Elephant. We put a fair amount of time into it, and it's satisfying work. Is we have a ton of conservative readers and we have a ton of liberal readers, and every time we say anything about this election, it turns into like MAGA, Trump 2020. Like the online thing is like 99% Trump for whatever reason, and we try to actually have dialogue and talk about the issues and not get into like, you're evil because you disagree with me. Although, it's hard when people are saying basically like, Black Lives Matter is bullshit. You're kind of like, wow, we're kind of talking about we're kind of talking about basic equity. Like,
I agree. It's very hard not to like be angry, and react emotionally to that, like on my post and my comments, like there's a few people who are like, how dare you, like you made it rich and then you want to make it harder on the rest of us. I was like, no, like the opposite. I want to encourage people to like, be able to have more money and build more wealth. And then only when you get to like my level and above, bear more of the burden or whatever, the burden of like taxation for the common good. And it's just like, and it's like this weird partisan thing where they get a hint of like, you're on the wrong team. And then it's just like attack, like I was like, I hope we're on the same team of like, let's all become better. But it's a tough world right now.
Well, yeah, it's good for folks to remember that like high taxes is not a liberal value. It's not a conservative value, or relatively high tax, fair taxes, I should say. Like you made a good point about it in your first paragraph, you said, your first line, I don't wish for less money. I don't wish for higher taxes. That would be silly. And, back in the 50s in Eisenhower, right, when the middle class in the US was the strongest, it was under a Republican president who was a moderate. And, what was it? The corporate tax rate was like
80%.
It was, and now it's like 29%. I don't know the numbers, but it's like,
there's like the top tax rate used to be like over 80%. Is like crazy. And like the economy is booming, right? So it's like, boom. And then, like, not that I'm saying that's the right number necessarily. Like obviously like there's economists who could try to like debate that much better than I could, but, but still like companies still want to make money. Like some people like, one of the main points I made in my article is that like the reason I paid such low taxes is because I don't work for my money anymore. I don't have a job. And the capital gains tax rate in the US is about half of the earned income tax rate. So a surgeon who is making $750,000 per year, who made the same amount of money as me, but like I literally dick around at home on Instagram all day, and he's like saving lives after acquiring $500,000 in student loans or whatever. Like he will pay twice as much taxes, or the surgeon might,
right? 37%.
Right, 37% versus 20%.
Tax isn't anything complicated. It means you're working for it actively. Yeah,
totally. Yeah, and earned income is subject to Social Security and Medicare tax. Right. The U.S. federal government's number one cost is Social Security. Unearned income, like mine, is not subject to Social Security tax. So like when I made $750,000 last year by clicking 2 buttons on Fidelity.com's website, everyone should, I'm not work for them, but you should be investing. But when I made all that money by clicking some buttons, I did not have to like contribute to helping poor people in old age. It's crazy. And so like, and like so many people are like, oh, Social Security is, you don't benefit from Social Security because you're not going to need it. I was like, why is helping poor people the one line item of the federal government that like rich people get to opt out of? Like I have a laundry list of shit I don't want to be paying for. Like I could give you dozens of things I think the federal government does that's stupid. Like maybe I don't like the wars that we're going to. Maybe like I don't want to be like bailing out banks or whatever it is. But I don't get to opt out of that because I'm not using it. But we get to opt out of helping poor people. It's just it's one of those things that like, and people it's so like their minds are so set in that way because it's like that's how it was set up. I mean, Social Security is like a very flawed system from the beginning. But, it doesn't mean that rich people should be able to opt out, and it's like purely on a burden placed on the middle class.
Yeah, I mean, I may not know exactly what you're talking about, but I'm relatively well educated politically, and Social Security, like almost anything in the U.S., may be flawed, but it also was the first any kind of safety net that we had created, which is a mark of a civilized society.
That's true. For sure. I think the idea is right, but yeah.
Yeah, someone works for 60 years, they're 70 years old or 75 years old. Where's our patriotism then? We don't want, an American who's worked their butt off for 60 years to be begging on the street. And then, in Boulder, we've had all this money move in the last 5-10 years. A lot of the kind of money that's moved in, a lot of it from California. So maybe you should move out here. But a lot of them love to, get on Nextdoor, that website, and they're eating on the homeless. And you're like, okay, I get that you don't want homeless befouling your view from your beautiful walk, but man, we don't believe in a social safety net. We don't want homeless people around. It's like, wow, what kind of society do you want to live in? Like,
yeah. I mean,
anyway, I'm getting a little liberal.
No, I mean, I agree. It's a tough problem, though. It's like one of those things where it's like, for every complex problem, there's like a solution that's like simple, clear, easy, and wrong. Like, because it's like very, there's a lot that goes into fixing homelessness. But I agree. Like, the not in my backyard kind of mentality is not a.
Yeah, on our Twitter, like 15 minutes ago, I shared Twitter at Elephant Journal. I shared an article from the CBC in Canada, and they paid, I think, $7,000 for training and for housing for homeless folks, and they saved. And they
I saw that.
Salt Lake City as well.
Yeah,
they've done this in the U.S. They saved more than $8,000 per person.
Oh, nice.
So you can fight homelessness, or you can actually address it. Save a little money, make lives better. It's not that easy, but
I've seen similar sites where they just go give a homeless person $1,000 like on a debit card, and then just see what happens. And they pay for rent or food or stuff that it's not just like it's not people who are like, man, I have all the food I want. I really want to do drugs or whatever. It's generally people who and it's like they're people. Like they don't want to be in this super shitty situation. Like they probably would love to have a job and like have some stability and for sure there's like mental illness and drug addiction that can play a role in that thing. So it's not an easy problem to solve, but it does seem like if you put money into fixing the problem instead of like policing them harder or whatever, seems like a better solution.
Yeah, it's actually a Republican governor in Vermont where I used to live. Heroin kind of swept through the whole state. It was really sad. It was really heartbreaking. It's like a rural drug phenomenon, and 99% white in Vermont. Republican governor put out, supported funding to help people get off of heroin, and all these people, many of whom were homeless, voluntarily went. Like people really don't. At least in Vermont, the experience was people did not want to be addicted. They didn't want to be on the streets.
Yeah.
They didn't want to be stealing. They didn't want to be doing any of that. They wanted to get clean, and they waited in line for it. And the funding ran out, I think, eventually. But it did a lot of good, and Vermont's really healed significantly.
Wow.
So, there's some hopeful things. It's actually good news. We can love one another, like they say in the Bible, which is also not liberal, I'm pretty sure. And,
really, a brown guy that's like helping poor people. That seems like a pretty liberal book.
Yeah, we've all seen the memes. Yeah, he actually had empathy and he didn't judge people.
Yeah, I know. But, wait, I thought that was a book on capitalism, wasn't it? Wasn't it?
Well, they asked our president which section of the Bible or quote from the Bible was his favorite, and he didn't. He was like, "I'm not going to give you one. I'm not going to say." Probably just didn't quote one. And then they said, okay, well, which testament? Old Testament. He was like, they're both. I think they're all great. And,
we know exactly why he was saying it because he has no idea, of course. Like, he's. I mean, I don't know if anyone's falling for that trick anymore, but who knows?
Yeah. All right. Well, so good to meet you. Great
you too, Waylon.
What was the website you recommended at some point?
Oh, it's just, it's not gonna, I mean, you can go to my website, personalfinanceClub.com, which is where I put all my good stuff. But
Okay, cool.
I was just doing it basically here. If I can leave with one piece of advice, it's the two rules that I always talk about to build wealth. Rule number one is to spend less than you make. Yeah, this has been kind of like a kind of political conversation, but most of my content is about how to make money. So spend less money than you make. So if you make this much, you spend that much. And then with the difference, rule number two is invest early and often. And so there's all this noise, all this, crazy stuff around debt and investing and day trading and Bitcoins and blah, 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 and like it's all crazy nonsense. The actual way to get rich, to build wealth, is to spend less than you make and invest the difference early and often over time. That's how millionaires are made, the vast majority of them, and that's how you build wealth. And so that's what I talk about on my page.
Thank you. I appreciate that. On that second point, there is all that noise about where the hell to invest, and all these stories of like, oh my God, someone bought Amazon, when it was just starting out. Like, how do you know what to invest in? That seems like a recipe for trouble, taking your savings and saying.
Well, it's a great question, and I love that you ask that way, because like that's the mentality, not the mentality, but like the pop culture idea of investing that's out there. That's like, it's risky, and it's guys on Wall Street like waving pieces of paper around, and it's like it's day trading and all this stuff. But basically my journey was, when I sold my company and I suddenly had money, I sat down and I read a book on investing, because I didn't want to be like one of those lottery winners that blows it all over. And then it was called The Beginner's Guide to Investing. It's 100 pages, and I got through and I was like, oh, that makes perfect sense. And then I read like a couple dozen more books on investing, and basically all say the exact same thing. And all that noise, the waving pieces of paper, the day trading, the getting out, the Tesla stock, it's just all nonsense. And so what you should invest in is what's called an index fund. And an index fund is simply buying into the full US or world economy. And so when you buy an index fund, you're not getting in and out of the market. You're not timing the market. You're not choosing when to buy and sell. You're just simply getting your fair share of ownership in the full US and world economy. Then there's two things, like when you hear all the news about the stock market dropped and blah, blah, there's basically two things that are baked into the market. There's the bottom, like the big piece of the bottom is like actual real value of these companies that are growing and profiting and generating revenues and innovating and hiring and doing all this stuff. And then there's like this speculation piece that's on top. It's like, that's what you see in these, like, bah, 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 bah. You just ignore the speculation piece. Sometimes it's up, sometimes it's down. But underneath that is this growing and growing thing that's always generating more and more wealth. And so when you buy an index fund, you buy all of that, and you guarantee your fair share of all market growth. And so, there's a little thing on my Instagram that says how to invest. I also do have a course that will walk you through. It's about 6 hours of content that just walks through everything A through Z. It's all on my website. It's the same thing you'll find in books. There's no secrets. There's no get rich quick. It's all like the same thing you'll find anywhere. But, basically when you kind of figure out that this is the true path to wealth, and the reason that like you don't hear it in like all the media, sorry, I can rant about this stuff forever, but the reason you don't hear about this.
I'm looking at your bio just so I know that it's there. So the link is in your bio. Yeah.
Nice. Yeah. So, the reason that, we don't hear as much about this as you do about day trading and Bitcoin and all that stuff is because like no one's profiting off this, right? Literally it's like a $1.5 trillion financial services industry, mutual funds and financial advisors and like, stock tip sites. But like when you just buy the whole economy and simply just claim your share, then no one's like getting rich off you essentially, but you're getting your fair share of the growth. And so that's why like I found that like I was in this place where I don't need to work anymore, and I can like share this message to people. And it's not my message. Like Jack Bogle, who's the founder of Vanguard, basically invented the index fund. Like basically once you dive into this world and you find people who are altruistic and experienced, they're going to tell you the exact same thing I'm telling you, which is to buy and hold index funds. So that's how you know what to buy.
And super dumb question, because I grew up poor, so I had no.
There are no dumb questions.
Very interestingly, I had like talk about education in America. I had until high school, I had no financial education whatsoever, and then I had one course in high school in Vermont that was like playing with stocks, but it was like exactly what you're saying not to do. It was like I think I won or was number 2 in my entire school because I bought tons of Gap, which this was like 1992 or 1991, but it was fake stock. None of us had real money. Yeah. So how do you buy an index fund, or how do you invest in the whole economy?
So I like that you did that in school, by the way. I think it's good to even get a taste of it so you kind of know what's out there. But I agree that's not my preferred way of investing. But basically, you open up what's called a brokerage account. So you can have a checking account, savings account. There's another type of account called a brokerage account. And instead of just having cash in there like you have a savings account, you put in investments, stocks, bonds, index funds. And so you can go to a website like Vanguard.com, Fidelity.com, Schwab.com, Betterment.com. These are linked all the way through my profile, that stuff. And you basically go there and you click open an account, and then you put your money in, and then you click buy index fund. I'm like kind of skipping over some of the buttons to click and stuff like that. And that's why I kind of made the course that I go through and I show you how to actually do it, and I click through all the different options and everything. But it's really not, it's very intimidating if you've never seen it before, and this isn't common practice for you. I was lucky to have a dad who basically walked me through opening up a Fidelity account when I was 15, and I've been investing ever since. So I was very fortunate. But if you're, in your 30s or whatever, and you've never done this, then it's well, where do I go? So yeah, you just go to account, you click open account. There's also a special type of brokerage account called a Roth IRA. Have you heard of that? Nice. And so Roth IRA basically is, I think one of the good things the government has done is they've said, hey, we don't want a bunch of broke old people. And so we're going to incentivize you and me and working people to save for themselves so that Social Security doesn't have to pay for everyone, which would be preferable, right? And so the first $6,000 per year people invest, they can put into a Roth IRA. Any money inside of that account is never taxed again. So,
well, that's
how
I know it, because that's one good thing I have done over the years of working. I always put as much as I can into the Roth, and I think there's one other, the 401k.
So that's an employer-sponsored retirement account. Same thing as another special type of brokerage account. But they're all just, I think people hear those terms and get scared. It's all just like accounts, like checking, savings, brokerage, Roth IRA, 401k. They're all accounts. You put money in there, and then inside of the investment accounts, you buy index funds, and you buy them by going to the website. You click buy, you click index fund, whatever, and my page shows you how to do that.
Okay, so I'm definitely going to get your course, and that was not planned, so this is not an infomercial.
Yeah, no.
But I am in. And then my final dumb question, if I can take advantage of having you on, and this wasn't even what we were going to talk about, but
the conversation always steers this way. When I'm on dates exactly. Or when I'm whatever, I'm like, hey, how's your Roth IRA?
It's like a gravity.
Yeah.
So if the U.S. economy is down, if the world economy is down, would the index funds suffer? I would assume so, right?
Definitely. But, when you hear about the market being down in the media, it's short-term volatility.
Right.
When you look at long periods of time, the market always goes up because all those underlying companies are always going to work, right. Building, generating revenue, generating profits, hiring, innovating, making new products. And so when you own Apple, Microsoft, Tesla, ExxonMobil, Pepsi, Samsung, Alibaba, when you buy an index fund, you own all those stocks. And so when those companies are doing good, they're all plowing money back in. And so I'll give you an example. I think about a week ago, Trump tweeted some nonsense about how he wasn't going to sign a stimulus bill. And the next day, the market tanked 600 points. Headline news, the market tanked 600 points. Then the following day, he tweeted some other nonsense like maybe he would or whatever. And then the market went up 600 points. But it wasn't, the rebound wasn't covered as much. And I don't really want to blame media bias or something, but it's just not news when the market goes up, because the market's always going up. And so you hear about the crashes, right. But you don't hear about the always going up, because on any given year, the market's up about 70% of years. So, the market being down is an unusual situation. It only happens 1 out of 4 years or so.
That. Yeah. One of my favorite, you should get this, is I think you can buy it on Instagram or Etsy or something. But one of my favorite artists painted the front page of the New York Times. And instead of all the headlines, the headline was, "It's a beautiful day today." And it's kind of you don't get the same coverage of a flower came up and a bee
Right. Yeah.
got the pollen,
Yeah.
So when the market is up, maybe, it's not as good of a story.
Right. And, and that's like, it's bad news if you're just like casually following it and you like only hear about the bad stuff. But, and again, I'm not blaming media's bias because that's like more interesting when the market crashes or whatever. But when you look at the chart over 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, 100 years, it's like almost a straight line up. And so like one great metaphor that I've heard is like, it's like yo-yoing upstairs. And so it's like you're walking upstairs, but then you're yo-yoing. And so, just the last couple of days, I've had a few people be like, oh, I started investing, I'm down 3%. And I'm like, you've been doing it for 2 months, like you're just like in one of these yo-yos, but then you're going to take a step up and it's going to come back up. You're like, whoa, I'm doing so great. And you're like, whoa. And then, but over time, you're making huge progress. And after you take 20 steps up, you're like, oh, okay, the yo-yoing almost doesn't make any difference anymore because I've made so much money.
Yeah, that reminds me of climbing. I climb and, it's an ongoing thing. So you would never be like, oh, I had a bad day climbing today. My whole career or my whole climbing path is going to hell. You'd be like, who cares? I'm going to be climbing again tomorrow or the day after,
Right. And then if you look at your progress of how good you are, how good your bad day is today versus a great day 10 years ago, sort of like just aging and everything, like, you're much more talented climber now, right? So it's like,
yeah. My skill is up here and my aging is taking, so I'm actually pretty steady.
Okay. Well.
And then, you mentioned the media kind of attention to, and not blaming them particularly, but we also hear tons in the media, like especially in view of Trump or the election, of the stock market is high, and yet our economy is like just been savaged by COVID and by our, kind of lack of response and disastrous response to it. So can you explain that too? How can the stock market be that divorced from everyday Americans' reality?
Yeah. So, I mean, I obviously consume media about this all the time. And like, one of the answers is that it's just crazy and that we don't know why it's doing that. Right. But the basic reason is the market isn't pricing the current economy. The market is the expectations of the future. Right. And so, right now there's a lot of unemployed people. Well, there's a few things that work. So one is that also like the top 500 companies in the US make up 80% of the entire stock market. And the stock market's only made up of big publicly traded companies. And so when you look at the S&P 500, which is what's being measured, we're talking about massive companies. And it just so happened.
You're not measuring the mom and pops going out of business.
Totally. You're not and what's happened with COVID is that like it turns out that it like kind of was good for Google. It's not good for Facebook. It's good for Tesla. It's good. It's like right. It was great for Amazon. So those giant tech companies and most of the giant companies like that basically did pretty good. So that's part of it. But also there's a part of it which is like people are thinking, okay, but if the bottom falls out of this thing and then there's like a Great Depression again, it will eventually be bad for those companies. So that is also priced into the market. And so, but basically the answer is like, it's just a combination. What I always say, it's a combination of the sum total of all human knowledge. It's constantly being priced into the market. And it's not a measure of where we're at today. It's a measure of where that sum total of human knowledge thinks we're going to be in the future. And so basically it's saying the stock market is, despite, the mom and pops kind of getting screwed right now, they're optimistic about the US economy continuing to be strong.
So basically, but it hasn't traditionally been this divorced from, if there's economic kind of collapse, the stock market usually goes with it more, right?
I agree. Like, I heard a guy on a podcast recently said one of the answers might be that it's just crazy and that it's going to crash, or like maybe, a vaccine comes out and then people have pent up buying power and money floods back into the markets and everyone comes back and like, other than some bruises, like most people are okay. Like, and we don't know, but I agree. It is, it does seem weird that the market's weird. Actually I'm like kind of doing a series of like measuring the last 40 years of presidential candidates and like measuring them by a bunch of different economic measures, one of which is the stock market. And Trump is actually, of the last 10 presidential candidates, like Trump has the 7th best stock market. So like, third worst. Yeah. And I think people, just because they're constantly saying, or he's constantly saying the stock market, it's not, his average gain has been about 10%, but like Clinton was like 18%. I think Reagan had like a 16%. Both the Clintons were crazy high. Reagan had some good ones. Obama had some great ones. Like everyone, and the only two, I think that, yeah, there's three below Bush, which were one Obama year. No, Obama had two. It was like both Bush years and a Reagan year, something like that. Were like, or no, it was, I forget what it was. But it was both Bush years because he had George H.W. Bush. No, sorry, George W. Bush, the younger Bush had. Yeah, so basically, like the stock market's not doing that great relative to previous presidential terms. And then when you look at the other economic ones, like GDP is through the floor right now. Jobs created is through the floor. Trump is 10th by a long shot. Jobs created is through the floor. Trump is 10th by a long shot. And then the government deficit, Trump is 10th by a long shot. So Trump, of like those four economic measures, Trump is out of 10, 7, 10, 10, 10. And so, I mean, I agree that like, you know, it seems as bad as those jobs, GDP, and government spending numbers are, it seems like the stock market is still surprisingly resilient, but yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, there's a comment, you know, they didn't have COVID, and that's a fair point. I just tweeted on Elephant Journal some coverage of an article about our, you know, we were the best prepared country in the whole world, despite Trump kind of cutting back the funding of our pandemic response team, which was responsible for being in China, being wherever, and identifying and containing it, helping to contain and coordinate it. So, you know, Trump from before the beginning took, you know, said it wasn't a real thing. Everyone knows this. We don't need to get too political about it, but, you know, we were best prepared in the world. We've had one of the worst responses to it. So yes, COVID is a real blow, and it would have been to any president. That said, you know, Obama came into office with a national, you know, great recession. A lot of presidents, you know, 9/11 happened under George W. You know, there's been a lot of challenges throughout American history. I don't think you could look at a single president without a major environmental, economic challenge.
Yeah, I agree. Like, I don't think you can measure a president but for his reaction to the defining crisis and his, you know, like you got to count that, right? Like, and you know, and also like in all my posts, there's only I'm doing a series of 4, and 2 of them I haven't posted yet, but I do look at like where Trump was without COVID, and it generally was it was towards the bottom anyway. So like I agree, like, you know, the dramatic GDP crash, the dramatic jobs crash, of course, it's because we're in a global pandemic. But first of all, like he's part of that response, and second of all, he was like at a bottom, you know, the bottom few anyway. So, in fact, for the spending one, which like I mean, again, like I try to be like a relatively moderate guy, but like you hear so much when Democrats control the national governments, it's like deficit spending is like the number one issue for Republicans. But like Trump's spending is like bigger than any, like his deficit's bigger than it's ever been before, and the debt's bigger than it's ever been before, and it's like not a peep. It's
and
like,
it was already going there before COVID. It was.
Oh yeah. Pre-COVID, he had vastly increased the deficit over Obama's. Like Obama's was like 3.7% relative to GDP, and Trump's was like 4.2, 4.3, which was the second, like the ninth smallest surplus of the ninth biggest, second biggest deficit. And the only deficit that was bigger than Trump was Obama's first term, when he basically, you know, had to like buy the banks out from the financial like apocalypse from happening. I mean, then Obama's second term, he had a much lower deficit, like in the top half.
Yeah, I feel like I used to live in Boston, and half my family had grown up in New York, and they were all Yankees fans. And so I lived in like the enemy's territory of Red Sox. And I feel like that's kind of how we've gone politically, where, you know, the Democrats, if they're the Red Sox, cannot like anything the Yankees have done. And the Yankees, if they're the Republicans, have to hate everything the Democrats have done. And we have to remember, we're all like Major League Baseball here. We're all Americans. We can afford to look at facts. We can criticize our own people. We can compliment the other. But we can also call a spade a spade. And anyway, I'm also a moderate. I am on the more liberal end of that. But really appreciate the talk. Appreciate your time.
Yeah, thank you. It's been a pleasure. Thanks for seeing my little post there. And I love what you're doing.
Yeah, and I want to see if we can get that post on Elephant and link to your course, because I think a lot of good people with millions of readers a month, or one of the biggest independent sites remaining in this age of Facebook and, you know, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. But, you know, our readers, I think some of them have a decent financial education, but I think
by far the most. Speaking
I
of
mean,
really dope.
it's not your readers. It's like humans, and like I'm in no shortage of, unfortunately, I'm in no shortage of business of, like people that can then help, need help learning finances and largely it's like successful, smart people, it's like people who go to work and make a great living and just like, because finances are scary. And it's also like, it's like a faux pas, like I personally make mine very transparent. And when I do, I know it's a very salacious thing. And I partially do it because like, I'm trying to grow my Instagram or grow my brand or whatever I'm doing, but also because I want to like help like diffuse like the stigma about talking about money. Like it's like if you say how much you make, it's like this like naughty thing. And if you and having debt is like this shameful thing. People like, studies say like people would much rather disclose their STDs publicly than disclose their debt publicly or whatever. And so, I want to like, help move the conversation to be like, hey, let's talk about this. Let's learn about this. Let's make this part of the, the educational system growing up, all that good stuff.
Yeah, I mean, that was one of the first like kind of attractive things about your post. That post that a friend of mine, that firefighter lady, had shared with me is you're like, I make around $759,000 or approximately. And wow, no one ever talks about that.
Right.
And I think partially it's because now even if we're successful, we're a little ashamed of how much we make because things are so kind of extremely unequal now,
Yeah.
Whereas back in the 50s, again, a Republican administration, the CEO might make, say, $100,000 in those days, and the employee might make $10,000 or $20,000, not adjusting for income or maybe inflation. I don't know what I'm talking about, but it was much closer.
Yeah, I agree. And at the time, it's like, wow, that guy makes 10 times what I make. Like that's a lot more. And now it's like 500 times. It's definitely I feel like there's a lot of wealthy people, like I would maybe include myself, where it's like, this is going to break at some point. Like, for my own, like, I feel like it's very short-sighted for me to like, lower capital gains tax because my money makes my, like, it's like, for what end, like I already have plenty of money. Like I would much rather like the country and the world be healthy so that like, we don't look out the window and keep seeing orange skies and rioting and everything, right? Like, I think that's better for
now.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, literally, like, no one in Boulder, especially children, can go outside safely right now.
That sucks, dude.
And we're the #1 city in you're like, okay, maybe it makes for a good article, but this climate change thing ain't working out,
Yeah, that sucks, dude. Sorry, I know our skies have cleared, but we had like a month like that, and I'm in San Diego.
Yeah, I think we're in our 3rd month of it. Not solid. We have some good days, and but very similar to California. Half of the Rockies have been burning here. Well, really appreciate it, and let's
be in touch.
Yeah, we'll be in touch. Thank you so much. I'm sure you're going to get a ton of followers, hopefully, out of this. Everyone go follow. What's your account name again? I can't.
Personal Finance Club. I got the T-shirt here.
There we go.
Personal Finance Club. Yeah, easy to find.
And I'm going to get your course. Thank you so much.
Sweet. Thanks, Waylon.
All right. Take care.
Have a good one. Bye.